morning, the pursuit of Michael Schumacher continues tonight via the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, which is underway in less than 15 minutes' time. Now, in terms of the Drivers' Championship, it's a vain pursuit, with Schumacher having claimed the title at Aida last weekend, but the runners-up spot still being disputed by the Williams teammates. Damon Hill only 10 points ahead of David Coulthard. The Constructors' title, that could be decided today. Benetton with a 21-point lead over Williams. Benetton within sight of their first Constructors' title. Well, two heavy accidents in qualifying. The first involving Britain's Mark Blundell. It put the McLaren driver out of the final session, but not out of the race. Mark Blundell emerged from this to start 23rd on the grid for today's Japanese Grand Prix. It was a similar accident yesterday involving Japan's Aguri Suzuki, and the Japanese driver suffered a broken rib in another heavy shunt. Could have been worse, but Suzuki is ruled out of today's race. This is Suzuki going off in the Ligier in qualifying for what he'd already announced would be his 65th and final Grand Prix, forced into retirement a day early. Well, Michael Schumacher, with the title now settled, claimed that he was now going to relax and enjoy his racing, and yesterday he duly took for him a rare pole position, his first since the Canadian Grand Prix in early summer. Well, it left a rather dispirited Damon Hill and David Coulthard 4th and 6th on the grid respectively, with Jean Alesi 2nd and Mika Häkkinen an excellent 3rd. Those the bare details ahead of this penultimate round of the World Championship. More comes from Tony Jardine, Jonathan Palmer and Murray Walker as we go live to a rather damp Suzuka for this Japanese Grand Prix.
Good afternoon from Suzuka, because it is afternoon here in Japan, although to be honest it's not a very good afternoon. You can see the rain spots on Damon Hill's windscreen and visor. But first of all, let's update you on Aguri Suzuki and Mark Blundell. Aguri Suzuki is in hospital, but he's just there for a couple of days rest. He is okay except for the fact that he's broken a rib. Mark Blundell, the incredible Iron Man, he went in the wall at, he was approaching it at about 160 miles an hour yesterday, as you have just seen. I was talking to him just a few minutes before I came into the commentary box. He is perfectly all right. He's been out in the warm-up this morning. He was 11th fastest in the McLaren Mercedes, and will of course be taking part in the race, starting from 23rd on the grid on account of the fact that Suzuki will not be taking part in the race, and Mark is going to be one of the people that we are watching. Weather, well, on Friday and Saturday we had excellent weather conditions for the two qualifying sessions, in which Michael Schumacher, as you've just heard from Steve, took his 4th pole position of 1995. Quite unusually for him this year, because it's been the two Williams drivers up at the front in the last few Grand Prix. His 10th Grand Prix, his 10th pole position of the year. With Alesi on the front row of the grid in the Ferrari and looking very good indeed. 4th fastest in the warm-up this morning. Schumacher was 2nd fastest, incidentally. Mika Häkkinen, an excellent 3rd on the grid as you watch David Coulthard, who is starting from 6th on the grid, get ready for the race. And Mika Häkkinen was using a new Mercedes-Benz V10 engine designed and built by the Ilmor concern in Britain to very good effect. The car seems to be handling much better. That's Eddie Irvine, who is starting from 7th position on the grid. And Gerhard Berger is 5th for Ferrari, and as you've just heard, David Coulthard is in 6th position. Now, the weather this morning for the warm-up was wet, and our hearts sank because last year's race at Suzuka, which was won by Damon Hill, was a two-part event on account of the fact that the safety car had to come out to slow the cars down in the dreadful weather conditions, wet. The race was stopped after 15 laps for 20 minutes. And then we had that tremendously thrilling finish when Michael Schumacher was catching Damon Hill, but not fast enough, and Damon won by 3.6 seconds. Our hearts sank today then, because we feared that we might be in for a repetition of that. But the rain has stopped. The track, as you can see, as Heinz-Harald Frentzen gets into his car, his Sauber Ford, 8th on the grid. He's had a lot of engine trouble with hand grenade qualifying engines in the last 2 days, but he's using a normal race engine for the event here at Suzuka, and it's undoubtedly going to be a very interesting race. 53 laps. Strategy is always a problem here, and Michael Schumacher, having won the World Championship, is a long way from having turned off in 1995. He's got 2 objectives left for the year. One is to help his Benetton team win the Constructors' World Championship before he goes to Ferrari in 1996. And to do that, they need to be 16 points ahead of Williams when they go to Adelaide for the next and final Grand Prix in Australia. And at the present moment, the Benetton team is 21 points ahead of Williams. They're looking in a pretty strong position. And his other objective is to beat Nigel Mansell's record of 9 wins in one season, which he achieved in 1992. If Schumacher wins here today and in Adelaide, he will do it. There's still 2 races to go, and as ever, we've got the strategy query. Jonathan Palmer.
But before that, we can see from this great overhead shot here, the helicopter being about as high as the clouds will allow, what a fabulous circuit Suzuka is. This really is the favourite, along perhaps with Spa as the other one that can come into that area. Suzuka, great driver's circuit. It's 6 kilometres or 4 miles long. It's got the section we can see right in front of us with these S-bends meandering up through the back of the circuit. On the right-hand side of the picture is the main pit straight, the pits in the middle, coming down to that fast right. Now this S's section, as it's called, is one of the most demanding of any circuits in the world and requires great technique of letting the throttle flow, coming off the throttle, on the throttle. It's not a great braking and then turn in kind of sequence, and drivers really do make a big difference here. And in fact, Michael Schumacher was 1.5 seconds over this section faster than his teammate Johnny Herbert. And then following it round the corner, you can see a big runoff area just at the bottom of the screen. Now those are the 2 Degner corners, as they're called, the first and second one before it goes under the bridge. Now that first one has claimed more cars here than any circuit in terms of going off. Gerhard Berger, Jean Alesi, Mark Blundell, Johnny Herbert all went off on that. Then they come up to the hairpin, right down to 50 miles an hour for that hairpin, second gear, then up through the gears, through this fast right sweeping corner. Now that's absolutely flat out at about 170, 180 miles an hour if it's dry. If it's wet, about 10 miles an hour less and a little bit of a feather. And then coming in around, that's actually the first Degner corner, the one that we were talking about. And you can see that there's a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a dry line, but certainly the moisture is off the track. Now, in terms of the race, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion, certainly in terms of pace, that Michael Schumacher is going to be out in front. There's no doubt that he's being on pole for the first time since Canada is the most dominating qualifying performance, but it's going to be a great scrap behind that. There's no doubt for second place between Alesi, Häkkinen, Hill, Berger and Coulthard, all within 3/10.
Suzuka, Japan, the 16th Grand Prix of 1995 in the 17 race series. An extra race this year. It's the last one in Australia. But this is the one that could decide the Constructors' Championship. Pole position is on the left-hand side of the grid, and that is the right-hand side of your picture, where you can see the light blue front of Michael Schumacher's Benetton Renault. And next to him, Jean Alesi in the Ferrari. He's only on the front row for the 3rd time this year. A demon starter, a great driver in the wet. Häkkinen well up in the McLaren Mercedes. Hill and Coulthard down in 4th and 6th, and they've been on the front row of the grid for the last 3 Grand Prix. Heinz-Harald Frentzen lower down than we expected him to be, because he's one of the drivers like Eddie Irvine who knows Suzuka like the back of his hand. Olivier Panis is the only Ligier driver with Suzuki out of the race. Mika Salo, driving for Tyrrell, knows this course extremely well, as does his teammate. And Karl Wendlinger, 15th, is the Austrian driver returning to the Sauber team for the second time this year after his crash in practice for the Monaco Grand Prix last year. And as usual, it's the Pacific and the 40 cars that are bringing up the rear of the grid, with the exception of Mark Blundell, starting last on account of the fact, as I explained, that he had that very nasty crash yesterday and he's perfectly okay today. So getting ready for 53 laps, but before that the grid will be cleared and the cars and drivers will go round on their final parade lap.
Yes, a great fast circuit here, very demanding circuit, and a circuit which is generally regarded to be a real driver circuit, and that I think is why we've seen, or certainly a contributory factor to why we've seen a slightly different grid here, with Schumacher being really well out in front. There's no doubt Schumacher is the best driver in Formula 1 at the moment, and his 0.8 of a second qualifying margin really is underlining that. But Jean Alesi in second place. Now that's the first time for a long time that we've seen Jean Alesi right up there. Great performance from Alesi in the Ferrari. But the real sensation of practice has been the form of Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen in the McLaren missed out on the last Grand Prix at Aida after recovering from his appendectomy, Magnussen deputising for him, and Häkkinen has come straight back in within 10 days of having his appendix out and has set absolutely blistering form all weekend, and that really has underlined, bearing in mind the fact that McLaren is not really any different. There's a slight engine improvement, but it's not a big deal. It really does underline what a tremendous factor the driver is these days. Probably with the way the races are, with this sprint form of racing, with the pit stops, even more important than it has been. So Häkkinen in third. Well, Hill and Coulthard very disappointed. It's been a glum Williams team so far this weekend, but I think one of the reasons that they are down in fourth and sixth respectively is because they got a bit lost on the setup. On day one they were in better form, Hill being in second fastest, but they went the wrong way. They made the car too stiff on the springs, in fact, and that lost its grip, and as a result of that they slipped down the order. Eddie Irvine, seventh place, great position from Irvine, really going well there. Of course he was brought up here in Japan, in Japanese Formula 3000, which has proved quite a feeding ground to Grand Prix drivers. We've got Frentzen, who also came from that background.
And down, we're up in the commentary box in the dry, but can tell us about conditions, Tony Jardine in the pit lane.
Yeah, as you said earlier, they are clearing all the grid, but I'm hiding behind a pile of tyres alongside Michael Schumacher's car because we're desperate to see if anyone's going to take a risk and put on slick tyres, because it is dry, it's stopped raining, and it's quite warm out here at the moment. The one I was looking for is Alesi. They've just taken the covers off his car. He's on wet, so is Schumacher. Everyone's going on wets at the moment. Katayama, though, we're not sure whether he'll finish this race. He's dislocated his left thumb, his gear change thumb. He did that this morning when he hopped over a curb and stuck his thumb through the gear change unit. He's had a pain-killing injection and he's actually damaged two of the ligaments in his thumb. So if he doesn't finish, you'll know why.
Thank you for that, Tony Jardine. And remember, the most exciting Grand Prix in many ways that we've had this year was the Belgian Grand Prix, where the conditions were not unlike this, and the Grand Prix of Europe, where similar conditions applied. And off they go now on their parade lap. So it's not raining, but the track is wet. Now, if anyone was going to be able to start on slick tyres, and if they possibly could, that would be an advantage, because I'm sure it'll dry out relatively soon. It would have been Alesi in the Ferrari, but we quite clearly saw him, and indeed we heard from Tony Jardine on wets. So through the second corner, 90 miles an hour. This is this S-bend section I was talking about. And each of these corners flows into the next. If you get one wrong, like that left-hander, it'll affect you on the following right. So a great degree of fluency is required through this section. Through the tight right, that's 90 miles an hour, up through the gears, fifth gear, exiting this left-hand corner, the Dunlop curve, at 170 miles an hour. Frentzen went off just about where we're looking. Then into the Degner curve, that's the first one, through there at 125, the first corner in fifth gear, down to third gear for the second Degner. See the big runoff area, the gravel traffic at the bottom of our picture. It's been visited by many so far. Out of there, down to the hairpin, right down to second gear, and braking from 175 miles an hour, and then trying to get the power down. That's going to be very tricky in these conditions. Exactly where they are now, as the drivers try and put 170 horsepower down from just 50 miles an hour. You can get wheel spin in these cars all the way
up to about 130 miles an hour. Well, this section, these fast-flowing right-handers, absolutely flat in the dry, but a bit of a feather. That means a little bit less than full throttle in the wet. And through the first spoon curve, it's then the second spoon curve. These two curves claimed the Williams drivers. They have both had offs there. Now, this is the fastest section of the track, up to 190 miles an hour into one of the most amazing corners in Formula One. It's called the 130R. That's because it's 130 meters radius. This is taken at 175 miles an hour in the dry and probably 160 in the wet. Now, as they come down, there's just the final chicane to go, and Schumacher bunching everybody up, everybody on wet tyres. I think strategy-wise, we're going to be expecting 2 or 1 stops, and that means that we won't expect to see the first stop until at least around about lap 17. Slowest corner here. But what's going to be particularly interesting is to watch out for jump starts. The start is on a downhill slope here, and that's going to be tricky for the drivers trying to come off the brakes and then onto the clutch very quickly for the start. Schumacher actually has a handbrake button on the front of his Benetton steering wheel, whilst the McLarens and the Jordans have a hand clutch. So McLaren, Jordan, Schumacher should have a little bit of an advantage.
Remember how important this event is for Damon Hill. He's lost the World Championship. There are only 10 points between him and his teammate David Coulthard for second place in the World Championship. Coulthard goes to McLaren next year and wants that second place just as much as Hill does. And in front of both of them, there are some very hard men. Mika Häkkinen, a quick starter in the McLaren who has taken people out at the start before now. Jean Alesi, a demon starter, and of course Michael Schumacher himself, who's in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So Schumacher in front, Alesi on the left as you look at the screen, second on the grid. The red and white cars, Mika Häkkinen, they are all on wet tyres. Behind Jean Alesi is Damon Hill. There's the man with the green, and remember, the green light comes on any time after the red, now that the rule has been changed. Straight down towards turn 1 they come. Schumacher in the lead, Alesi second. Häkkinen is still in third position. No changes, they go into turn 1. Damon Hill is still there in the Williams. Here they come into the S-curve. Left, right. That's Taki Inui, the Japanese driver, who has spun out already. And he went off on the first lap last year in the Simtek when the conditions were much worse than this. But now, as they come up towards turn 7, it's about 135 miles an hour, as we expected. And that is Roberto Moreno, who was to start from the pit lane, but does not appear to have done so. And remember, Suzuki is not in this race, the Japanese driver. So Michael Schumacher leads. This is the cross under the part of the course where they double back. Now up to the hairpin on the first of the 53 laps in this race. Schumacher, then it's on Renault. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari, Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren. Damon Hill is in fourth position, and it looked to me as though Eddie Irvine has moved up into fifth position ahead of David Coulthard. Take a check on that as they come into the spoon curve. Out of this up to the fastest part of the course, it drops downhill here into the crossover. There is Eddie Irvine on the replay. You can see him moving up. And there's the tangle where Taki Inui spun. Off goes Carl Wendlinger in the Sauber. Inui comes to a standstill and seemingly is out of the race because that is his arrow's heart. Trouble area is turn 2, just before turn 2. Michael Schumacher leads into the chicane. That's where Prost and Senna collided in 1989. And you can see how close Jean Alesi is as they come through to complete lap 1 with 52 to go. Schumacher, Alesi, Häkkinen, Hill.
Well, a nice clean start there. That was good to see. Difficult conditions. And the good news for us too is that Jean Alesi has got away in second place from his second place grid spot. He should have done that. But if anyone can mount a challenge to Michael Schumacher, it's going to be Jean Alesi in these conditions. Quite frankly, if it had been dry, I think we'd see Schumacher pulling away even faster than he is. In the background there, we can see David Coulthard really pushing Eddie Irvine, who made a great start, brave move. Coulthard there just between Irvine ahead of him and Gerhard Berger, who slipped back from 5th to 7th, as he's done so often this year. Berger does not tend to make good starts, and this is another one. But it looks very much like Schumacher is easing away already from Jean Alesi. Let's have another look at the start here. So difficult. You've got to be so gentle getting these cars away, you know. You can't just floor the throttle. You'd sit there in helpless wheel spin all day long. But feeding in the power gradually, probably only using full throttle in 3rd gear, certainly not in 1st. And watch this wide line of Schumacher's. He goes wide compared to Alesi. That's because there isn't the rubber down on that wider line, and he's got a little bit more grip. And we'll tend to see a few odd lines in these conditions, not just cutting the corner everywhere. Most places that will be the line. But if you can find a bit of track that has not been ingrained with rubber and that little bit of oil from dry conditions, you're going to find a bit more grip on some corners. So let's watch out for that.
Spoon curve, and you can see what a lead Michael Schumacher has got already. We've seen him starting from off the front row of the grid many times this year and still come through to win the race. So how is he going to go when he starts from pole position? We're seeing the answer already. It's Alesi second, no change. Mika Häkkinen well up in the McLaren Mercedes, being caught by Damon Hill. Irvine 5th, Coulthard 6th, Berger in 7th place. There's Barrichello 8th. And Johnny Herbert is 9th ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who started from 8th on the grid, so he slipped down 2 places. We're with Damon Hill now coming through to complete the lap and chasing Mika Häkkinen. Now, this is the stretch down to turn 1, about 190 miles an hour in the dry, a bit slower than that in the wet. Turn in now. Now, the visibility that we can see through the onboard camera is about accurate compared to that the driver can see, and it's not particularly good at the best of times. But just imagine trying to feed in your 700 horsepower here at 120 miles an hour with that degree of visibility. It's not good. Of course, you rely upon the forward airflow to dissipate the water off the front of your visor, and a bit of dirt, the mud that builds up, or certainly streaks of it on the visor, make visibility even at this stage quite a factor, quite a problem. Looking very good indeed for Michael Schumacher. On lap 3, he's already over 2.6 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi, who is being challenged by Damon Hill. There is the Ferrari. Damon Hill has dropped back since we last saw him. Schumacher's pulling away all the time, looking for those 10 World Championship points, which won't help him, but will help his team. So where is his teammate, who needs to be in the points as well, ideally? Johnny Herbert. He's not in the points. He's in 9th position. And you can see now as Schumacher exits the Spoon curve, climbs uphill past the club pits and the grid that he's going over now, into the chicane at the end of the lap, where they slow down to only about 35 miles an hour. Roll it right, roll it left. The pit lane entrance, and it's a very long run into the pit lane, is just before the chicane that you see now, as Michael Schumacher comes through to complete his 3rd lap. Now, he was 2.5 seconds ahead of Jean Alesi at the end of the previous lap. Moves over to the right as he goes down the quick straight. It's 2.9 seconds now, and the gap between Alesi and Häkkinen is 5.2 seconds, and Häkkinen is now got Damon Hill right behind him, 4th and gaining.
Now, after that after the dry qualifying session, a wet race was not what Mika Häkkinen or McLaren wanted. The McLaren really doesn't go very well in wet conditions and suffers generally from loss of grip, and that's there. Johnny Herbert still ahead there of Frentzen.
Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who's in 10th position, and Olivier Panis. Now, this is where the car-to-car battle is on the circuit. The cars ahead are fairly well spread out, but Johnny Herbert is having his time cut out to keep Heinz-Harald Frentzen behind him. They've both got a lot of experience of this track, and now we're back again with Damon Hill, and that is Mika Häkkinen in front.
And this is frustrating for Damon Hill, because he knows he should be faster. He was the fastest in this morning's warm-up session in the wet weather conditions, but Hill is being held up by Mika Häkkinen and paying the penalty, I'm afraid, for not qualifying well. This is why qualifying is so very important. You see how Hill closes up there on braking. Now, Häkkinen is holding Hill up. Hill's just 0.7 of a second behind. And then further back, Irvine is holding David Coulthard up, because Coulthard is only half a second behind Irvine, who's 2.5 seconds behind Hill.
And meantime, Michael Schumacher and Alesi are pulling away from their pursuers, Häkkinen and Hill, that you're looking at now. They are lapping some 2 seconds a lap faster, Schumacher and Alesi, than Häkkinen and Hill. They've just gone round in a whisker over 2 minutes, and here is the battle for third position between Finland's Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren Mercedes, England's Damon Hill in the Williams, Eddie Irvine in the background. Behind him, sixth position, David Coulthard, then Berger.
Now let's see if Hill can have a go at Häkkinen. This is coming onto the main start-finish straight, but of course Häkkinen's in front. He can get the power on earlier. And although Damon will surely close up, jump start penalty for Jean Alesi.
Oh, and that is terrible, because this, I think, has destroyed the interest of the race in the early stages anyway. Jean Alesi jump start. There's been a lot of controversy about these jump starts. Olivier Panis has had a lot of them, and Gerhard Berger, both the Ferraris. And Berger is in 7th position, and that means to say that now, effectively, Schumacher is some 13 seconds plus ahead of Alesi, because as I've said before, it's not just the 10 seconds that you're stationary in the pit lane, it's the slowing down before you stop and rejoining the track and speeding up to racing speed that is going to add extra time. Jean Alesi will now be very badly affected mentally. He is a driver who is easily affected by this sort of thing, and watch him now, because he'll be coming in, and Häkkinen is now effectively second, Hill is effectively third, and probably Eddie Irvine moves up to 4th position.
Well, how very, very sad for both Ferrari drivers. We're now with Jean Alesi there, and as I thought before the start, that as it's a downhill start, and that's unusual, this Suzuka track is the only place. Look at Alesi fighting that car. Car control really coming to the fore there. But as Suzuka is the only track where you have a significant downhill, it's all too easy to roll at the start. And this was something which was wondered about when we had this new electronic jump start mechanism, and we understood that there was going to be a view taken on just that. Let's see if Alesi comes into the pits. We're expecting him to. Indeed, he's coming in, and that's going to lose him certainly about 25 seconds and put him right back to probably about 10th behind Frentzen.
Well, it'll be great to see him fighting back. And talking about fighting back, as you see Alesi coming into the pits, Mark Blundell, who started 23rd, is up to 16th on this, the 6th lap of the Japanese Grand Prix. Alesi pulls in, there's a digital board there, and he will have to sit frustratedly and watch those numbers flick over. That's the Ferrari man behind, in case he has to restart the car, but he doesn't have to. And Alesi exits the pit lane as the traffic goes through, and he rejoins behind Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is now 9th, now that Alesi has had to make that stop. So Alesi drops from 2nd to 10th position, and that looks like Frentzen Sauber in front of him as he goes round the S-curve. Now, Schumacher is leading. Schumacher and Häkkinen is in 2nd place, some 11 seconds behind the Benetton Renault. And as ever, as we ride with Gerhard Berger, there he is. Now we've got Jean Alesi, the Ferrari, and we're on lap 6 of the Japanese Grand Prix, 53 laps long, as Barrichello turns in, followed by Herbert, followed by Frentzen, followed by the Ferrari.
Well, very sad for Jean Alesi, but at least we should get some entertainment here as we see how Jean Alesi copes with the cars in front of him. Frentzen's not going to be easy to get by, that's for sure, but he should have an easier time getting by Herbert and Barrichello. Whilst ahead, we're still, of course, waiting for Gerhard Berger to come in for his time penalty for his jump start there. But up in front, Hill is still trailing behind Häkkinen. Häkkinen lapping a 1.5 seconds slower than Michael Schumacher. And I don't think we're going to see pit stops for dry tyres for some time yet. The times are still very much wet weather times. Alesi all over the back of Frentzen there, trying to find a way by through the 130R. He has got a chance into this next chicane. Let's have a look. Well, Frentzen just takes the inside line a little, and Berger is now coming in for his stop.
Both Ferraris in, and that's a bitter pill for them and for the team boss Jean Todt and for everybody else. They didn't do as well in qualifying as they hoped they would do, but they didn't expect this to happen. This is Gerhard Berger's and Jean Alesi's last race but one for Ferrari before they go to Benetton in 1996, and on lap 7, which is the one we're on now, as we ride with Gerhard Berger round turn 2, Michael Schumacher leads Mika Häkkinen by 11 seconds. Häkkinen has got Hill 1.5 seconds behind him. Eddie Irvine is 2.5 seconds in 4th place behind Hill. Coulthard is 5th. Gerhard Berger was in 6th position, but now it's Barrichello. And look at this battle on the track with Alesi now up behind Herbert, having got past Frentzen.
Yes, good move there from Alesi. We did see the Ferrari pit there, clearly getting ready for a pit stop from Jean Alesi. Now that would be to put slick tyres on, and the rationale behind doing it that early is because he's being held up at the moment, and probably he may as well benefit from being, or certainly not lose any more. This will be a good time if Jean Alesi thinks he can live with it, and he's the most likely man to cope with it, of coming in, putting on slick tyres. And we hear that Benetton are doing the same as Alesi looks up the inside of Johnny Herbert there. But we expect to see Alesi come in for this lap for slick tyres.
And the great news is that I now have sunshine on the bench in front of me, and that sunshine outside will be helping to dry out the box as Alesi goes for it past Johnny Herbert. Coming up to the chicane, Herbert will have none of it and fights back. Don't forget, Herbert has won twice. Now Alesi does go through on the 130R up to the chicane, and Herbert is back a place, and it's Barrichello next, but into the pit lane comes Jean Alesi. Now he's coming in, we believe, to put on slick tyres. You can see the rain tyre grooves on the left front wheel at the left of your picture. There is one of the slick, smooth threaded tyres that are going on the Ferrari, and if he's chosen the right moment, and I think he has, we can now expect to see Alesi storming through the field. The order is Schumacher, Häkkinen, Hill, Irvine, Coulthard, Barrichello. Herbert is in 7th position. Frentzen is 8th. Alesi exits the pit lane, and he'll have to take it carefully on this lap while he feels out the conditions on the track. And you can see that it was the McLaren behind him as he turned in. And he's had just 4.5 seconds of fuel put in the Ferrari as well. Now, here is the man to watch, and Blundell is still in 16th position in the 2nd McLaren Mercedes.
And we need to watch the lap times carefully for Jean Alesi. Now he's on slicks. The fastest lap so far is from Michael Schumacher. Now that was just on lap 2, interestingly, 1:59.4. Now you may well wonder why he's not gone quicker since. If the track's drying, why hasn't he gone faster? The reason being that these wet tyres only work properly when you get the water to cool them, and in fact you can end up going slower as the track dries out. I think we're going to see Schumacher coming into the pits now. No, he's staying out for another lap. Well, he clearly thinks that's the right thing to do at the moment. Of course, we don't know what strategy he's on, and that may influence it. But I do think, think I saw actually, reflecting back to Alesi coming into the pits, that I think Rubens Barrichello meant to come into the pits and had a bit of a look at the pit lane, but then braked too late and couldn't make it and actually went straight on. So let's see if Barrichello comes in the pits on this lap,
which is lap 9. Schumacher leading Häkkinen by just under 12 seconds. Häkkinen 1.5 seconds ahead of 3rd placed Damon Hill. In fact, Häkkinen is extending his lead over Hill. He's just made his fastest lap of the race, and he's eased away another 0.3 of a second. You're watching Michael Schumacher. Eddie Irvine is 4th. Coulthard is in 5th position. Alesi has dropped to 10th. And you can see a stream of them coming in. That is Johnny Herbert from 9th position in the race. He's come in, and you don't need me to tell you, before Michael Schumacher. And that was a spin, I do believe. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari. If it was, we'll get a replay. We joined him on car, and he's in 15th position now. And it's still on lap 9. Schumacher 12.5 seconds ahead of Häkkinen, and Jean Alesi storming. If he did have a spin, it's very understandable that on slick tyres Parts of the course are still, as you can see, very damp indeed, and there would be minimum adhesion between those smooth tar treads on the Ferrari and the tarmac of the track. Indeed, you can see the car sliding, and here's a replay at the chicane as he closes up behind Pedro Lamy in the arrows, who was in 14th position, runs wide onto the grass. You can see for yourself what is happening, and off he goes.
Yeah, what is happening there, I think, is that Pedro Lamy was not aware of Alesi coming round the outside of him, moved across to the left, and literally forced Alesi off onto the grass and then the gravel on the left-hand side.
Well, Alesi's back in it now, and he's got Lamy ahead of him, so he's got to do it all over again. Catch the Portuguese driver in the Minardi with the Ford engine, and you can see Lamy is on rain tyres. Alesi dives through this time. Lamy probably a bit embarrassed, moves over, and into the pits comes 4th placed Damon Hill, 17.5 seconds behind Michael Schumacher to take fuel and 4 slick tarred wheels. Out with Hill. 75-mile-an-hour speed limit in the pit lane. Over the line, now he can go for it. Turn 1, turn 2, this is Luca Badoa coming towards us. And we're on car with Jean Alesi. Look for Pedro Lamy. Well, you saw him just disappearing out of the picture. Alesi does a 360-degree spin and fortunately rejoins facing the way he was going.
Absolutely, very, very fortunate for Jean Alesi there, but I'm sure a bit of Alesi's legendary car control came into it. Interesting to see with that Williams pit stop how slowly it appeared and carefully Hill came up to his pit, and that is because they've been eager. Look at that, he's now 5 seconds a lap faster than the previous fastest lap, and that really means that you've got to be on slicks. Schumacher must surely, and anybody else, come into the pits this lap. There is the evidence, you need to be on slick tyres.
It's happening all over again. Jean Alesi on slick tyres moves up from 15th to 9th with a lap in 1 minute 54.4 compared with the previous fastest lap near the 2-minute mark. He's really gathering speed and making up time all the way. Lap 10 out of 53. Schumacher is 12.5 seconds ahead of Häkkinen. Irvine is up to 3rd place. Damon Hill has been in and put on new slick tyres. Schumacher hasn't been in yet, but he's coming in now. Here is Michael Schumacher, the race leader, in for slicks. Now, is Mika Häkkinen going to get through? I can see Häkkinen coming round the last corner now, and Mika Häkkinen goes into the lead of the Japanese Grand Prix as Schumacher passes him. Eddie Irvine may be in 2nd place as David Coulthard comes in. Yes, Eddie Irvine is 2nd. So now Mika Häkkinen leads, Irvine 2nd. I think Schumacher got through to 3rd place. Here is David Coulthard into the pits. Damon Hill, his teammate, has already been in and out and is already going a lot quicker, of course, on slicks than he did on wets. Out goes Coulthard, and we're on lap 11, and you're watching the fastest man at Suzuka, Jean Alesi, who is now 6th. He was 15th. He moved up to 9th. He's now in 6th position, flying 1 minute 51.4 seconds. This is the man who won the Canadian Grand Prix. This is the man who wants to take another victory to Benetton with him next year when he joins the team.
And to give you an idea of just how remarkable Alesi's performance is, it's not just that he's on slicks and the others aren't, because Rubens Barrichello did indeed get on slick tyres, but Barrichello is lapping in 1 minute 56. He's 5 seconds a lap slower than Alesi, and indeed Johnny Herbert is he's 5 seconds a lap slower as well. So these conditions really do suit Alesi. This is when he can make up the ground if at any stage in this race. Slick tyres in damp conditions.
Alesi versus Hill. And look at Jean all over the back of Damon Hill's Williams Renault. And they'll have to be very careful here. These are 2 of the top men in Grand Prix racing today. Into the spoon curve. Out of it to accelerate up to 185 miles an hour on lap 11 as they come up towards the chicane at the end of the lap. So Hill 5th, Alesi 6th. Ahead of them Coulthard, although his pit stop has probably affected things there. Irvine, Häkkinen and Schumacher.
And look at John Lacey. He's going to drive round the outside of Damon Hill, and he does it. Incredible at the chicane. And Eddie Irvine into the pits. Now, that was him, and there is the McLaren in the background. That will be Mark Blundell, I think, as he goes out. No, it's Mika Häkkinen. Mika Häkkinen, we're looking down on the fin now. He was leading the race, but he is no longer. Where is Michael Schumacher? Wonderful view of Mika Häkkinen at work with that very big steering wheel of his, and Jean Alesi ahead of Damon Hill up into turn 7 on towards the crossover. We're on lap 12. And again, Damon Hill there, just look at the way Lacey does this. This is absolutely fantastic. Around the outside, on the damper line, both cars have probably got similar amounts of fuel in. It's an absolutely fair scrap. Lacey doesn't even have to squeeze Damon Hill. Now that is the reaction of team manager Frank Williams. He really would love Damon to be a better racer than he is, and to have Lacey not just going by Hill like that, but pulling out at the rate he is. Lacey is now lapping 1 minute 51, 1 minute 52, and Hill is about 3 seconds a lap slower than that. Lacey is in a class of his own at the moment, and until we see Michael Schumacher get up to speed, which we shall do in the next lap, there he is, we'll get an idea of whether he can actually match Lacey.
So you've seen Schumacher go through. Here is Jean Alesi in the Ferrari. They are both on slick, dry weather tyres. The rain is holding off. The course is drying out. The speeds are going to go faster and faster. We're on lap 12. There are still 41 laps to go as race leader Michael Schumacher completes the lap. And there in the background is the man who is in second place and fastest, Jean Alesi. Damon Hill is third. Jean Alesi's just made the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 49.6. That is the first lap in under 1 minute and 50 seconds at Suzuka today. And he's looking for that second win of 1995. Schumacher, Alesi, Hill, Häkkinen is then next in fourth position. Eddie Irvine in the Jordan Peugeot. David Coulthard down in sixth position. Rubens Barrichello is seventh in the second Jordan Peugeot. Eighth is Johnny Herbert. And all the top men now have made one stop, although Gerhard Berger has been in twice already.
Now this really is one of the most amazing driving performances I've seen. We saw Alesi in that awesome form at the Nürburgring in similarly damp conditions, but now Alesi running a little bit wide there. I think he braked a little bit too late, but he's lapping 3 seconds a lap faster than Michael Schumacher. Alesi, once again, 1 minute 49.6. Schumacher on the same lap, 1 minute 52.7. But Alesi is only 6.8 seconds behind Michael Schumacher at the moment, and Alesi had to come in for that stop-go penalty for his jump start. This is absolutely sensational. And by the way, in case you wonder why didn't they change those tyres when he had that time penalty stop, he was not allowed to. When you have that kind of penalty, you must only come into the pit for that penalty, and you can do no refueling or no change of tyres. Now let's see what this lap's going to be as Michael Schumacher. You can see the track clearly is now getting drier by the lap, and that's Katayama off in the Tyrrell. Well, that's exactly where Heinz-Harald Frentzen went off this morning, and once again Katayama's record of accidents is absolutely appalling. He's crashed out of most races he's done this year.
Yeah, let's not forget though that he's dislocated his thumb. He was probably having to fight to control that car and cope with a lot of pain as well. It's probably the reason why he went off. So Schumacher is leading on the 14th lap, and Jean Alesi is the fastest man on the track, just 5.5 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. Third is Damon Hill. Jean Alesi was only able to finish 5th a week ago. Here's a replay of Katayama spinning backwards off, turning round, going into the tyre wall. He will be perfectly all right physically, although obviously mentally he will be very depressed. He's gone off in front of his own home crowd in Japan, where he very much hoped to do well for his own sake and also for his Yamaha engine supplier's sake. That is Alesi second. Look ahead and you'll see Michael Schumacher, hopefully.
Just then we saw Lacey go around with a wider line at the hairpin once again. Now once might have been him braking too late, twice is definitely not, and that clearly is the best line. And just look at, he is right up now. That is must be Gerhard Berger. Yes, that's Gerhard Berger, right up behind Johnny Herbert, of course. But reflecting back to that Katayama incident, what a remarkable job those tyre walls do, and they are particularly effective here at Suzuka, because we've seen a lot of cars go off with remarkably little damage, and Katayama would have gone off at about 120 miles an hour there, and yet the car was still able to be towed out by the rescue truck to pull it to a safe place out of the way of other cars.
Herbert and Berger, Benetton and Ferrari battling for 9th position on lap 14, and the gap between Schumacher and Alesi, first and second at the end of the previous lap, was 5.4 seconds. It is now 4.2 seconds. So Alesi is gaining on the race leader, world champion, double world champion Michael Schumacher, at the rate of a second a lap. Herbert, Berger, now we're with David Coulthard, and he goes past Eddie Irvine up into 5th position, closing up behind the 40 of, it looked like Pedro Diniz to me, the Brazilian driver. Irvine goes through, and behind Eddie Irvine is his teammate Rubens Barrichello. So this is the battle for 5th position. Coulthard's got it at the moment. Irvine is 6th. His teammate Rubens Barrichello is in 7th. It's lap 15. It's Schumacher being caught by Alesi. 10 seconds ahead of Hill, who is 3rd. 12 seconds ahead of Hakkinen, who is 4th. And 6 seconds ahead of David Coulthard, who is 5th. Now, on the face of it, this is going to be very sobering stuff for Michael Schumacher, because he has somebody behind who is actually lapping 1 second faster than he is. Now, he's either going to recognise that Alesi is doing a better job in the circumstances, but the other possibility is, of course, weight of fuel in these cars, and we're not quite sure what strategy they may have adopted, but it may well be that Alesi and Ferrari were going to go for 2 stops, and that Schumacher all along was going to go for 1, and that would mean that his car would be heavier, probably by about a second a lap. We're not going to know the answer for some time yet, because at the pit stops, when the drivers all put slick tyres on, they all put fuel in too, and I'm just working out just how far that's going to take them before they're going to need to come into the pits again for another lot of fuel. Right, 5 seconds comes down to 4 seconds. 4 seconds comes down to 3 seconds. That's what it is now, and it's worth repeating the fact that both Alesi and Berger have had an extra 10 seconds plus added to their race time as a result of the penalty for a jump start. They've both been in twice, once for the jump start penalty, once for a new set of tyres, and notwithstanding that, Jean Alesi is second, only 3 seconds behind the man you're looking at now, race leader Michael Schumacher on lap 16. And continuing to lap faster. Alesi has again done another fastest lap. 1 minute 47.6, and you can see for yourselves how he's gaining on Schumacher.
Yes, I think to give Alesi and Berger the most credit for their driving, particularly Alesi, it's not, of course, just the 10 seconds that's lost when they're at rest in the pit. It's the time taken into the pit lane and coming out, and that's a total deficit around about 20 to 25 seconds. So this is absolutely stunning from Alesi.
So let's just look at this. Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, they're coming up to the crossover point now, which is at the corner, the left-hand corner that they're at now. The course disappears underneath them. Now they brake hard for the chicane on the 16th lap. 5 seconds on lap 13, 4 seconds on lap 14, 3 seconds on lap 15. And we're with Barrichello looking at his teammate Eddie Irvine's Jordan Peugeot, which is in 6th position. The last points scorer at the moment. At the moment, just for the record, if Michael Schumacher stays where he is and the Williams drivers stay where they are, then the Benetton team are going to win the Constructors' Championship, and that is a spin! Off goes Barrichello at terrific speed, slows down onto the grass. Now we need to look and see whether his car has been hit. I didn't see what yet. Well, Barrichello is out of the race to join Morbidelli in the arrows who went out earlier, and Ukyo Katayama. And Rubens Barrichello walks away very dispiritedly indeed, because that is his 9th retirement.
And a Ferrari's coming into the pits. It's Gerhard Berger coming into the pits. The team are not expecting him. They're not ready. And he's pulling forward. He's going to retire. I'm quite sure of that. Berger has some problem. There he is. That is the end of Berger's race. He's probably radioed as he was coming up the pit lane, and so they knew that Berger's race was over.
For the 6th time this year, Gerhard Berger, and that puts paid to any World Championship points for him. 6th in the championship at the moment. So he's just got one more race for Ferrari, and Rubens Barrichello walks back to the pits, where on lap 17 Schumacher leads Alesi by 2.5 seconds as the Frenchman goes faster and faster in the Ferrari. If he keeps this up, he's going to be with Michael Schumacher in a lap or so. Now let's see what happened to Barrichello as he turned in for the last corner. Well, that won't have done Eddie Irvine's car any good, because as you saw, Barrichello's rear wing hit Irvine's Peugeot and tilted up before he hit it again. Let's hope for Irvine's sake that there's no damage. Gerhard Berger, not at all pleased, throws his gloves across the garage out of the Japanese Grand Prix. Schumacher leads Alesi. Hill is 3rd, but 10 seconds behind the leader. Hakkinen is 4th. Coulthard is 5th. Eddie Irvine is still in 6th position, but up to 7th goes Heinz-Harald Frentzen as Barrichello retires.
Well, Barrichello there clearly trying an out-braking manoeuvre on Eddie Irvine into the chicane. Irvine ahead there. Now let's just hope Irvine's right rear wheel was not deranged and the suspension not bent by that incident. We can only tell by his lap times. We'll keep you posted. But I think with Jordan Pittard getting ready, we've just heard, so maybe he does have a problem. But apart from the clonk on that right rear wheel, Eddie will not have been impressed by that one bit. He's renowned for his colourful languages. Frentzen really is capitalising on what's clearly or looking like a problem from Irvine, and I suspect he's going to go by.
Yes, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Irvine both know this course intimately. They've raced here for years in Formula 3000 before they went up into Formula 1. Irvine for Jordan, Frentzen for Sauber. And Frentzen, as I said earlier, had a lot of engine trouble in the qualifying sessions. He's got a race engine in here, which gives less power but won't be so sensitive. And he's doing his very, very best to get past 6th position, Eddie Irvine, and up into the points. And Frentzen's been there a good few times this year. He had his first podium position in Italy at Monza.
And John Alesi has set another new fastest lap, a 1 minute 45.8, a tenth of a second faster than Schumacher. The gap is now just 2.1 seconds there. Now let's keep an eye on this battle here. This is the best battle at the moment between Frentzen there chasing Irvine. The question is, does Irvine have a car problem?
Difficult to tell. Very determined, very experienced, very hard man, Eddie Irvine. This is his last race. There's going to be a lot of changes. Last race but one for the Jordan team before he goes to Ferrari next year to partner Michael Schumacher.
Well, I think the answer to that is probably no, he doesn't. His previous lap was a 1:48.6. That's a 1:47.8, so he has gone faster. And I suspect that what we saw there was probably... And Alesi there really getting right up behind Michael Schumacher now.
Marvellous! John Alesi has closed that gap from 5 seconds, and remember he also had that jump start penalty which added a lot more to his problem, and he's now right up behind race leader Michael Schumacher, and this is going to be a new experience for Michael Schumacher of late, because he's been used to storming through the field in places like Belgium and Germany. Wonderful race at Aida where he won and clinched the World Championship, but now he's got real trouble on his hands in the form of the V12 Ferrari, and this Suzuka circuit suits the Ferrari much better than Aida. We're with Alesi now, looking at Schumacher exiting the last turn, dropping downhill towards turn 1, ahead of Mark Blundell, who is now in 12th position and has been lapped, so he's come up from 23rd to 12th. A terrific drive. bearing in mind that he went off at 160 miles an hour yesterday. But all the attention rightly is on what you are looking at now. Schumacher versus Alesi for the lead in the Japanese Grand Prix, and it's going to be a titanic battle from here on. One of them will be coming in sooner than the other, almost certainly, for another tyre stop. But meantime, we can enjoy this.
Well, let's just have a think about what might be happening in terms of strategy. If we presume that Ferrari and Alesi were going to go for a two-stop strategy, and I think that's a fair assumption, then we would have expected them to have stopped at about lap 17 for the first stop, lap 35 for the second. It's a 53-lap race. Just look at the way there, Alesi really grappling with that Ferrari. However, at that first stop, I timed the fuel pipe being on for about 6 seconds on that Ferrari. Now, if they got 4 seconds worth of fuel flowing, that's 40 litres at the rate of about 10 litres a second. And 40 litres of fuel will take you about 10 laps around here at this circuit. It's 4 litres per lap. So that puts us looking at round about lap 27, lap 29 for a fuel stop for Jean Alesi, assuming that his tank was, assuming that he was going to go for that two-stop strategy. Now, it may well be that Schumacher was going to go for a one-stop strategy, and in that case, he would not be expected to stop until around about lap 26, so he could go on until about lap 40, lap 38. So we expect to see Alesi stopping, I believe, in about 8 seconds.
Alesi P2. That's the sign from the Ferrari team. Schumacher is past Luca Badoer now. I thought he might be bought by him as he went into the first turn, but he's got through, and now Jean Alesi will have to do the same thing, get past the Italian.
Clearly, I meant 8 laps there, actually, not 8 seconds. So about 8 laps time for a stop, I think, for Jean Alesi,
who is now going to go for Luca Badoer. We're on lap 21. Schumacher is now the fastest man on the track. He's responded to the challenge as Alesi darts out of Badoer's slipstream, whips past the Minardi, and sets about closing that minimal gap between himself and Michael Schumacher. It was 1.9 seconds, the first time under 2 seconds in this race since Alesi got to grips with the Benetton. Damon Hill, meantime, is still in third position, but he's 11.8 seconds behind. As into the pit lane comes Heinz-Harald Frentzen with the front wing missing. He was in 7th position. Here's a replay. This is what happened. Heinz-Harald Frentzen coming up behind the Jordan of Eddie Irvine, who turns in, it spins as Frentzen hits him. Frentzen goes on. Eddie managed to keep the engine running and accelerates away, but now it's going to be a long stop for Frentzen for a new nose.
And a mistake there from Frentzen, new set of tyres on, new nose, but you could see the front wheels of that Sauber locked for a long time as he was guiding into Eddie Irvine there. And poor old Eddie must be feeling like a punch ball now. He's been hit by Barrichello, hit by Frentzen, and once again we can only hope there's no damage to that Jordan. But Jordan Pitt, we now here are getting ready for the second time. They're preparing just in case Irvine needs to come in.
And back goes Schumacher's lead to just a little bit over 2 seconds, from 1.9 seconds. So he's responding magnificently. He knows exactly what the situation is, of course, partly because he'll be able to see Jean Alesi, second place Ferrari, in his mirrors on either side of his head, and for the other reason, his pits will be telling him exactly what the situation is by the pits to car radio. And Damon Hill is dropping back. He's 12.5 seconds behind now in third position, but 15 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen, who is fourth. Meantime, David Coulthard is now the fastest driver on the track. In fifth position, he's only 4.4 seconds behind Häkkinen and catching him. Eddie Irvine's held on to that sixth position, in spite of the fact that he's been hit by Barrichello and been hit by Frentzen. Herbert is seventh. Heinz-Harald Frentzen been in for a new nose cone. Everybody up to 10th position, and that is Olivier Panis, has been lapped already. Retirements from Bertrand Gachot, Roberto Moreno, Gerhard Berger, Rubens Barrichello, Ukio Katayama and Gianni Morbidelli.
Well, Coulthard really has found some pace. He's picked up about a second a lap over his previous best, but at the moment we are seeing, of course, this close fight between Alesi and Schumacher, but 10 seconds behind Alesi is Mika Häkkinen, and the gap has stayed fairly constant between Häkkinen in third place, who's 14 seconds behind Hill, I beg your pardon, in third place, who's 14 seconds ahead of Mika Hakkinen, who's now only 4.3 seconds ahead of David Coulthard. Again, it's my guess that Hill and Coulthard are running more fuel than Mika Hakkinen, so I'd expect to see Hakkinen coming in a little bit later maybe than Jean Alesi, but certainly some time before the Williams cars.
Schumacher up behind Pedro Diniz. He's passed him for the second time. The Brazilian in the 40 has now been lapped twice by Jean Alesi as well. In the process, the gap came down to 1.9 seconds. Schumacher seems to have things under control, but news from the pit lane and Tony Jardine.
Yeah, we've been unable to talk to Gerhard Berger at the moment, but his car came in, they put it up on jacks and they were playing around with the engine, so we suspect it was engine problems. But at the moment, there's this on-off situation at the Jordan Peugeot pit, so I'm right alongside the pit crew, and they're expecting him to come in quite soon, but I think he keeps changing his mind.
Well, look at Jean Alesi. Now the fastest man on the track, 1 minute 44.5. He's going quicker and quicker, but as I said before, Schumacher, as he goes into the spoon curve, knows who his opponent is, he knows where his opponent is, and it's ironic in a way that it's Schumacher who's going to be driving for Ferrari next year and Alesi who's going to be driving for Benetton next year. Role reversal. Now, is there going to be a time closing here as they come through to complete their 23rd lap in this 53-lap race? It looks to me as though there is. 1.9 seconds was the gap. Right at the chicane, left at the chicane, into the last turn. Over the line goes Michael Schumacher now. Over the line goes Jean Alesi now. And the gap is 2 seconds. It's exactly the same.
I don't think it's going to change a great deal, I must say, until Alesi comes in for the stop. I think he's going to make within about the next 6 or so laps, I'd say, give or take a couple of laps. Alesi, I think, will remain about 2 seconds behind, and it's these sort of conditions that really do bring out the best drivers. Schumacher, now that's the first time we've seen Schumacher with the fastest lap. You know, the conditions at the moment are probably about 2 seconds away from what I would think a dry time's going to be. 42 I'd expect to see later on. They're doing 1 minute 44s at the moment. But so not only has the track been slippery, and of course the drivers have been grappling with it on these dry weather tyres, but it also changes lap by lap, of course getting faster as the cars go round and the water comes off the track. It picks up tenths or hundredths of a second more likely grip, corner by corner. And the really top drivers like Alesi here can judge from looking at the corner, feeling how it was last time, just how much later he can brake. It might be just 3 meters, how much faster he can turn in. It might be just 3 or 4 miles an hour, but all of these things count. And it's just building up this feel for the car, the feel for the grip, to make sure that you're pushing to the absolute optimum the whole time, corner by corner and lap by lap.
Schumacher, the fastest man on the track, his fastest time is about 3.6 seconds slower than Nigel Mansell's 1992 lap record in the Williams Renault, when the car, of course, had a 3.5 litre engine, 3 litre engines these days, and in those days too they had active suspension, ABS brakes and much more downforce. So it is a terrific drive by Michael Schumacher, controlling things from the front, and even more so, in my opinion, by Jean Alesi, in view of that jump start penalty that he's had to pay, and which he's overcome by getting ahead of everybody in the race except the one man who you're looking at now, Michael Schumacher, on lap 25.
Interestingly, at that first pit stop that all the drivers did, changing from wets to slicks, Alesi's time in the whole of the pit lane was 3 seconds less than anybody else, and that included Michael Schumacher. Now, I think we can infer from that they probably were at rest, say at least 2 seconds shorter. That means they put 2 seconds less worth of fuel in, and looks like smoke from the back of the Ferrari.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Does that mean the engine's going? Jean Alesi has definitely blown his engine in some way, smoke pouring out of the back, and just as the jump start spoilt the beginning of the race, this is really good. That's Jean Todt, the head man of the Ferrari team, and Jean Alesi will surely be coming in at the end of this lap. He's almost at the end of the lap now. It might, of course, just beat. No, I was going to say it might be an oil leak onto the exhaust pipe, but out comes his arm. Jean Alesi is joining his teammate Gerhard Berger in retirement from the Japanese Grand Prix, and that is virtually certain to mean that Michael Schumacher will be able to go through and win his 9th Grand Prix and equal Nigel Mansell's record, unless Damon Hill can do something about it. But the Englishman is now 17 seconds behind Michael Schumacher.
The empty feeling a driver feels in these sort of situations is beyond description. Alesi, who's been fighting there for some 25 laps of this race, for it all to come to an end so suddenly when it was all looking so good. But I really do think, to be fair to Alesi, we should differentiate here. Jean Alesi has not blown his engine. The engine on Jean Alesi's Ferrari has blown. And I think there is virtually no chance whatsoever that that engine blow-up was anything to do with Jean Alesi's driving. The engines are very tough these days. They have rev limiters. Alesi gets out, and we have to wonder, was this a problem that perhaps related to that of Gerhard Berger? We didn't see any smoke from Berger's car, but nevertheless, to have two Ferraris out with what we understand our engine problem does seem to be a little bit of a coincidence here. And you know, here is quite a hard circuit on engines. It's a lot harder than the last circuit, Aida. That has Alesi getting very fed up and frustrated there with the marshal as he tries to steer the car back. Surprising how many cars get more damage, in fact, from being manhandled by marshals after an incident than actually during the incident. But of course now that's given Michael Schumacher a 20-second lead over Damon Hill. Alesi out of the way, and he'll be quite pleased to have Schumacher, to have Alesi out of his way. We hear the Benetton pit are getting ready. They are indeed. This looks like to be another tyre stop and fuel stop. Not clearly for Schumacher on this lap, but will it be Herbert? Will it be Schumacher?
Well, Benetton are achieving their objective now, because not only is Michael Schumacher in the lead on lap 26 by a commanding over 20 seconds from Damon Hill, but his teammate Johnny Herbert is up in the points with the retirement of Jean Alesi. And incidentally, that was the 6th time this year that Jean Alesi, running across the track, has retired. His Japanese girlfriend Kumiko Goto is in the garage. She'll be glad to see her man back, but would have wanted to see him out in this race for a lot longer. And so would all of us after a terrific drive like that. The winner of the Canadian Grand Prix is out. He's just got one Grand Prix left for Ferrari. We ride with Michael Schumacher now, who can rely on the reliability, the famous reliability of his Renault V10 engine, and his own skill, his double world championship and all the wins in front of him to pace himself home to his 9th victory, although there's still half the race to go. Eddie Irvine is coming into the pits from 5th in the race, and Johnny Herbert is also in from 6th position. Here is a replay. Let's see what's happening. Off goes the Pacific of Andrea Montemini, out of the race, I suspect, to stall his engine, and that will be the 8th retirement to join Alesi, Gasho, Moreno, Berger, Barrichello, Katayama and Morbidelli. As we look, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen at it again with the Benetton in front of him, and you saw that there's a battle between Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard. They're very, very close indeed. Now the race order on this, the 28th lap, as you watch Michael Schumacher, the race leader, is Schumacher first, Hill second. He's gained a bit on the Benetton. He's under 20 seconds behind it now. Mika Häkkinen is in 3rd position, just 8 seconds behind Damon Hill. David Coulthard is right up with the McLaren Mercedes. And now Mika Häkkinen is responding to the challenge. He's the fastest man on the track. Mika Häkkinen has just gone round in 1 minute 43.4 to try to shake off 4th place David Coulthard. We're with Häkkinen now.
And we understand the McLaren pit are ready for a pit stop. It's my guess it's for Häkkinen, and Blundell being back in 10th place at the moment, having worked up, of course, from being right at the back of the grid in 23rd. Now the dry conditions again to Ron Dennis there. is going to be has been much more inspired this weekend. This is very good news for Ron Dennis and the McLaren team. They've been through some dreadful doldrums, but the dry conditions are going to suit the McLaren much more than the wet conditions. Hakkinen really driving absolutely superbly. His left foot braking technique being quite an advantage here. So let's expect to see Hakkinen come in, and let's again count how long they're going to spend refueling that car, because it's all significant in determining whether he'll need to stop again.
And so, too, driving magnificently is Häkkinen's teammate Mark Blundell, who's in the top 10. He's in 10th position, so both McLarens are inside the prestigious top 10 places. Mark Blundell is 10th. He's been lapped, but he's fought his way up to that 10th position from 23rd and last on the grid. Now, when Hakkinen comes into the pits, and he's only about 500 metres from turning in, when he stops, we need to look at the length of this pit stop. If it's going to be around about 12 or 13 seconds, it may well be his last one. If it's going to be around about 7 or 8, I think he's going to need to come in another time. Well, he's coming in. Mika Häkkinen in, and he was only 6 seconds behind Damon Hill as he did so. Hill in second place, now 21 seconds behind Michael Schumacher. That's Häkkinen. The wheel gun's ready. New set of slicks on. The battery starter ready in case it's needed. Häkkinen keeping the engine running. The lollipop man in front will tell him when everybody's clear, and out he goes. Lights up the tyres. He's only got a short run to the exit of the pit lane. And Mika Häkkinen rejoins as we look at Michael Schumacher coming up behind the arrows of Taki Inoue, the Japanese driver, who is in 14th place. He's been lapped once, he's about to be lapped again. He's going a lot better here than he did in his first Japanese Grand Prix last year, when he went aquaplaned off at the end of the first lap in the Simtek. Defers to Michael Schumacher. The world champion goes through. This is lap 29, 53 lap race. Hill 21 seconds behind. Häkkinen has been in.
Yes, and when Häkkinen was in, we unfortunately lost the clock on the graphics there, but his total length of time in the pit lane was 38 seconds. It was 32 seconds for his first stop when he was actually at rest for 6.5 seconds. So I think that's entirely consistent with that being Häkkinen's last pit stop. Great cloud of black smoke then. That was the dust from the carbon fibre brakes there as they change Panis's tyres. Let's look for this stop, because this will give us an indication of the strategy. That's quite a long stop. I think they're making this the final stop for both Häkkinen and Panis, so to expect them to run all the way through to the end of this 53 lap race now. That gives them a 24 laps to do on the remaining fuel.
And more pit lane news from Tony Jardine.
Yeah, I was just behind the Mika Häkkinen pit stop, and I must say it was an excellent job by the McLaren boys, really good, but it did take a long time putting in the fuel, so it was about 12 to 14 seconds approximately, so I think Jonathan is correct on that one. The other news is from Eddie Irvine. He came in finally. The crew had been waiting for him to come in for a long time, but he did have damage to the rear wing, and they pulled away a strip of rear wing from Eddie Irvine's car, and he went sideways out of the pits in roaring style.
And that strip will have been torn off, of course, as a result of the collision between himself and Rubens Barrichello. Well, might have been as a result of the collision between himself and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Depends which side of the rear wing it was. Anyway, Eddie Irvine in and out as you watch 3 times winner Damon Hill, who is second in the World Championship, but in third position now is his teammate David Coulthard, and I remind you that there are only 10 World Championship points between them at the present moment. Damon Hill in second place in the championship, David Coulthard in third position, and Schumacher is now again the fastest man at Suzuka. 1 minute 43.37 to the nearest place. And Damon Hill comes through. This is the end of the lap, the chicane. You notice they've got the curbs built up on the inside. I was talking to Schumacher about it, and I said, is that an extra problem? And he said, not really, you shouldn't be that far over there anyway.
Right, Schumacher is now 19 seconds ahead of Hill. He's another 11 seconds ahead, 11 seconds ahead of Coulthard. There is the Benetton pit. We know that Herbert's had his second stop, so this must be for Schumacher. Now Schumacher, I think, is likely to drop back, probably to, well, he'll be second place. Hill will take the lead after this pit stop, but again, let's count the seconds as they go through, and we are expecting about a 12-second pit stop, 11 or 12-second pit stop from the very slick Benetton team. If it's that length of time, that'll be Schumacher's last stop, and if it's round about 7 seconds, it'll mean he's going to make yet another stop.
The complete racing driver, Michael Schumacher, he thinks every detail out, discusses everything with his pit crew before anything is done to the car, works out the strategy to the nth degree, and now he passes Pedro Diniz and turns into the pit lane. So this is Michael Schumacher coming in for his second stop. Now remember what Jonathan's just told you, and now we're with Damon Hill. Is he going to take the lead in the Japanese Grand Prix? Well, there is Schumacher, and I'm looking up the road to see where Damon Hill is. He was 19 seconds behind Michael Schumacher at the end of the previous lap. I can see him coming round the corner now. Damon Hill goes past me and into the lead. There he is on the right. Now look left, there is Michael Schumacher exiting the pit lane, and David Coulthard will be coming through. There is Coulthard. He's behind the car you just saw, which is behind Michael Schumacher. So Schumacher is now second to Damon Hill in Japan, but he has just made this stop. He is on new tyres, therefore he will have more grip, and that is the new race leader, the man who won last year's Japanese Grand Prix, Damon Hill, and who desperately needs a victory. There have been harsh words spoken in the Williams garage this weekend in Japan, and Damon Hill has been a downcast man, and he needs this win not only for his self-respect but to help his team in the Constructors' Championship, although I must say that that is looking a lost cause at the present moment, and to make sure that at worst he maintains his second position in the World Championship against his teammate David Coulthard. This is lap 32. But what about pit stops for the Williams team? We've seen Ferrari come in, we saw Schumacher come in, Häkkinen's been in, but nothing from the Williams cars so far. Now what I think they were doing here is probably going for enough fuel in those cars that they could have run through till mid-distance of the race. That's lap 25, lap 26, because of their lowly grid positions, they were not confident that they were going to be able to get by Häkkinen and Lacey in the early stages. And as a consequence of that, they thought they put enough fuel in to keep running all the way through. So let's assume they've done that. That would take them to lap 25. They came in for their pit stop to change tyres on lap 10. That's Sarlo, I think, in one of the Tyrrells. It must be Sarlo, of course, because Katayama's out in one of the Tyrrells. And I think they've probably put on about another 60 litres of fuel. That will all mean that we should expect to see the Williams cars of Hill and Coulthard come in. Mark Blundell there. Come in round about lap 36, lap 37. That means 5 laps time, and it should be a shorter pit stop than that we saw for Schumacher. It should be round about maybe 9-10 seconds if they do it properly, because of course they'll have to put less fuel in to get to the end. So let's update ourselves on the situation. This is lap 33 out of 53. Damon Hill, that you are looking at, leads in Japan by 10.5 seconds from Michael Schumacher, who is second. David Coulthard is 4.5 seconds behind Schumacher. Mika Häkkinen is in 4th place. The Williams pit is getting ready to receive either Damon Hill or David Coulthard, and both Johnny Herbert and Eddie Irvine have been in. Herbert is now in 5th position on 2 World Championship points, to add to the 6 that Schumacher is on at the moment. Things are still looking very rosy indeed for Benetton in the Constructors' Championship. They just have to finish 16 points ahead of Williams here at Suzuka to guarantee it.
Well, the news that Williams have got the pit ready, on the face of it, blows my theory. But on the other hand, and he's not come into the pits, he's carried on, we won't know, in fact, whether or not they were intending to stop once until we see just how long that pit stop is. And if I was right, they would be able to keep going until maybe lap 36, lap 37 before taking on fuel. But of course, tyre performance will have degraded by then, and they may feel that they're better off coming in, even though there's going to be some fuel left in that tank, topping it up with a fresh set of tyres. And if that's the case, it'll be an even shorter stop, maybe 8 seconds, something 8 or 9 seconds. So let's have a look. Looks like one of them, Coulthard or Hill, is going to be in within the next lap.
And Michael Schumacher is slowly catching Damon Hill. The gap on the previous lap was 10.5 seconds. It is now 9.9 seconds, riding with Schumacher now. There's the giant Ferris wheel which overlooks the Suzuka circuit. Went up in it yesterday, fantastic view. But I'd rather have Michael Schumacher's right now. He's just done a lap in 1 minute 42.9. That's the quickest of the race so far. Damon Hill's previous lap was 1 minute 43.5. So that's 0.6 of a second gained for Michael Schumacher, with Coulthard still third, Häkkinen still fourth, Herbert still fifth, Irvine still the last man in the points, 7 seconds ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who is seventh. Parnis is 8th, Salo is 9th, and Parnis has been lapped, as of course has Salo. 10th position is Mark Blundell, both McLaren Mercedes still in the top 10. Schumacher. 9.9 seconds was the gap. Up to the chicane. Out into the last corner. Fastest man on the track.
And it's Coulthard coming into the pits. It's Coulthard. Now Coulthard was 26 seconds ahead of Häkkinen. Coulthard was third. Häkkinen was fourth. Coulthard may well get out in front of Häkkinen and not even lose a place. But it's going to be close. Let's look how much fuel goes into that car. We're expecting round about 9 or 10 seconds, I think. Watching the clock go by. The tyres are already done. You can see that fuel takes the longest. A little bit sticky there. Well, 10, 11 seconds. Let's watch for Häkkinen.
I can see Mika Häkkinen, but I have no doubt that David Coulthard is going to exit the pit lane in third place, therefore still ahead of Mika Häkkinen as Pedro Diniz moves over. He must be wondering if he's in the same race as everybody else. People flying past him all the time. That is the 4th time that he's been lapped by Hill and Michael Schumacher. And Williams are getting ready again. So Coulthard in. And that was indeed a shorter stop than we saw from Schumacher, one of the shortest we've seen at this stage. So it does look as if Williams have opted to come in before the car effectively got right down to the limit on fuel, because the benefit of putting on a fresh set of tyres was greater than the benefit of continuing to run with a lighter car. Now, when Damon Hill makes his stop, we're going to expect to see him drop back. He's 9.7 seconds ahead of Schumacher. Schumacher is 7.6 ahead of Coulthard. That should mean that Coulthard will then end up being ahead of Hill, but of course that was, I beg your pardon, before the pit stop from David Coulthard. Well, Hill is probably going to be passed in the pit lane as he stops by Michael Schumacher. No, not quite, because you can see Hill for yourselves, and I wait for Michael Schumacher to go past, which he does now, to regain the lead. There he is on the right. Are we going to see Damon Hill exit? Yes, there he is. 10.5 seconds. The race rejoined on lap 36 with the implacable rivals who have been racing against each other all through 1994 to the World Championship finale in Adelaide last year, when Schumacher and Hill controversially collided, for the first time then, and they've done it since. And now Damon Hill is in second position.
And two much better pit stops from the Williams team, particularly that of Damon Hill. That was in fact a second faster, including the pit lane time, than that of David Coulthard. The Williams have come in for quite a bit of criticism in terms of their strategy and pit stop technique, and indeed Hill lost a significant amount of time at the last Grand Prix when a pit stop took 4 seconds too long when the refueler couldn't get the nozzle on. But in fact, Williams' team have said that part of the problem is that their drivers haven't been pulling up in a precise enough position, and that contributes to the problems of their pit stop technique. Now, we've seen in the last 2 days of practice, virtually every time a Williams car comes in, they've been pulling up to that pit stop position in order to practice being accurate, and you need to be accurate to within a foot, and that's not easy coming down the pit lane from maybe 120 miles an hour before the speed limit section, but they've practiced at it, and it really looks as if it's paid off. The drivers and the team doing a much better job. In fact, a very good job that looks to be as good as that of Benetton now.
And Michael Schumacher comes through to complete his 36th lap. Now, the gap on the previous lap was 7.8 seconds. It will be more than that now, of course. Schumacher goes into turn 1. There's the team boss, Flavio Briatore, silently hoping that he will be going home with the Benetton Constructors' Championship laurels, as Schumacher took the championship last race. And out goes the 40 of Pedro Diniz, and Damon Hill is now 13.7 seconds behind Michael Schumacher on lap 37. 40 have had a very hard time of it this year, and that's Pedro Diniz's yet another retirement, in addition to the many he's already had this season. Getting a car up to Formula 1 reliability and speed from standstill. It was a Formula 3000 team last year. It takes a lot of doing. So Michael Schumacher on lap 37. Is he going to be able to maintain that gap ahead of Damon Hill? If he doesn't maintain that gap, he should be able to maintain a gap to take his 9th win of the season and equal Nigel Mansell's record. Then he would only have the Australian Grand Prix to win to beat Nigel's record. But there's still some distance to go in this race, and off goes Damon Hill. Damon Hill bouncing across the gravel at the Spoon Curve. That's where both he and David Coulthard went off yesterday, and that has effectively destroyed not only his chance of catching Michael Schumacher, which was a slim enough one in the first place, but of retaining his second place in the World Championship, because that was David Coulthard going ahead of him at the Spoon Curve, and he rejoins behind Mika Häkkinen and behind Mark Blundell, who's already been lapped. So that means that Coulthard will have gone up into second place, Häkkinen will have gone up into third place, Damon Hill goes down to fourth position. But is the Williams damaged in any way? After leaping across the bumps, Damon Hill turns in. The pit crew are ready to receive him for an inspection of the car at minimum. It looks to me as though the front wing is all right, the rear wing is all right. They're going to put a new set of tyres on anyway, I think. And this is another bitter, bitter blow for Damon Hill.
It is indeed. I'm afraid it's also another mistake from Damon Hill. I'm afraid we really just have seen too many from someone who is really trying to challenge for a world championship. Now let's see what's going on. Looks like there's a problem with the nose cone. They are undoing the nose of that Williams, and that's about a 40-second job. We've got the stopwatch going, having to lift the car up to try and undo the screws that hold it. And Hill keeping the engine running, just not revving it too much. You can see the other nose cone being readied. These are designed to be put on quickly because, of course, the front wings are vulnerable on these cars. On go another set of tyres, the front wing, checking it, and off he goes. Well, it was a quick stop, but I'm afraid Hill is now right out of contention. And it really is just a great shame to see Damon, who we know can drive quickly, just make too many mistakes, I'm afraid, under pressure. Now, here's what happened. Here's the replay. He's coming in down 120 miles an hour. He gets wide, simply just drifts wide. The curb launches the car in the air. He's bouncing across the gravel trap, frankly trying to keep some power on at this stage to try and get sanctuary in the grass along the far side. That is exactly, in fact, what his teammate David Coulthard did on the Saturday morning practice session. It's Van Aert. Blundell's done more or less the same thing, and it's the same corner. Clearly a tricky part. I suppose it's, I'll tell you what, actually, I do believe that the 40 car that went off there, or the 40 car we saw stationary, was round about that. I just wonder if we're being too harsh here, and if some oil has been dropped by that 40 before it pulled off. And so I'm pretty sure the 40 pulled off at that second Spoon corner. We think it did. I think we ought to take back those words of criticism on Damon Hill there, certainly until we get some more information or some more thoughts on that. But to have two drivers off at the same corner within 2 laps seems too much of a coincidence.
I sincerely hope you're right, Jonathan, because it's an open secret that off there goes Mark Blundell, and that is more or less the same point that he went off yesterday afternoon at about 160 miles an hour and ended up backwards in the tyre wall to literally knock the stuffing out of him. But I was saying it's been an open secret here that both Patrick Head and Frank Williams have been saying harsh things to Damon Hill, and here he is down in 5th place for just 2 World Championship points. And now David Coulthard has gained 3 World Championship points on Hill. In fact, he has gained 4 World Championship points on Damon, and that would mean to say that when they go to Adelaide, if they stay in the positions they're in now, there would be only 6 World Championship points between them for 2nd place. Meantime, here is the man who has got 1st place in the World Championship beyond a shadow of doubt. He's already won it. Michael Schumacher, we're on lap 40. He leads David Coulthard by half a minute, as near as makes no difference. Mika Häkkinen is 4.4 seconds behind David Coulthard and lapping at almost exactly the same speed. Johnny Herbert is now clinching the Constructors' Championship for Benetton because he is in 4th position, Hill 5th, Frentzen 6th. News from Tony Jardine in the pit lane.
Yeah, I've just been talking to a couple of the Benetton mechanics, and they said that Michael Schumacher has just radioed in that it is wet on the other side of the track. So I don't know whether that has affected the 2 drivers that went off at Spoon Curve.
Well, it could well have done. Wet on the other side of the track, but without wishing to sound harsh, and it's easy to criticise when you're not in the driving seat, it's the same for everybody.
No, I agree entirely, and I think that it looks as if that's the report. I'm sure it's accurate, that water was the significant factor, not potentially oil from a 40 car. That's exactly where it happened, the corner we're looking at now. But it's exactly the same for everybody. You can see the droplets coming, and that's one of the Sauber cars coming in. It's Wendlinger in for his 2nd stop. And thinking of Sauber, actually Carl Wendlinger, he's coming back for this race and for the next race at Adelaide. And that was after Bouillon has been dropped from the team. And Wendlinger, the Sauber team, have been very loyal to Wendlinger. And of course he had that dreadful accident at Monte Carlo last year when he was comatose for 19 days. And David Coulthard's going off. This looks like rain is indeed, it's the same place there, that rain is indeed falling at the back of the circuit. Now this is when it's going to be so desperately important to monitor the weather, to read the track conditions, to feel how much grip you've got. We were talking about it earlier on when they're on slick tyres, and it started to rain here as well. I think we may be about to see, and David Coulthard gets very out of shape there. Now that's where Mark Blundell went off, and Blundell went off a lot harder than that, but it looks as if, to me, some of the gravel came out from the side pod that was being contained by that Williams car, and as he braked for the corner it shot back and it got underneath the wheels, and that precipitated David Coulthard going off. I suspect we may well see a replay of that, but Frank Williams distinctly unimpressed. And I'm afraid the fact is that it's generally reckoned that the Williams car is the fastest car of the year. Its reliability is not bad, it hasn't been the best, but they have not been winning sufficient races, and I'm afraid that does point the finger at the drivers. Good though they may be, they are not of a level, I believe, of Schumacher and John Alesi and probably Mika Häkkinen, quite frankly.
Oh, well, there it is, you see. Off goes the Sauber of Heinz-Harald Frentzen. He went off this morning, now he's gone off this afternoon. He's in 6th position. Is he in 6th position? Because that's Mika's. No, it wasn't. It was, it was Schumacher going past. And of course, Schumacher, having told his pit it's wet on the other side, will almost be certainly, and you can see that, Damon Hill's problems are compounded by the fact that obviously after he put on that new nose cone, maybe he forgot to press the speed limiter button, and he's now coming in for another pit stop, another 10 seconds plus the time that it takes to slow down and then get into the pits. What a dreadful race for Damon and for Williams, with Coulthard out of the contention. The only consolation for Hill will be that at least he's not going to lose his second place in the World Championship to Coulthard.
Indeed. Now we saw the Williams mechanics running down to go to the end of the pit lane to be there when Hill comes in for his time penalty, spending 10 seconds at rest. And it is indeed my guess that, as happened in Belgium when Hill got a pit lane speeding penalty, he did that because he forgot to push the button, quite frankly. The car has the equipment and he forgot to push the button. That's probably the most likely cause of it here. Certainly a degree of mitigation and all the turmoil, no doubt, going through Hill's mind. At that pit stop, he was the first person to come to grief at that slippery section of the track. And this is that point there now. And he's done it again. This is unbelievable. He's done it again.
And this time he is out of the race. Well, words fail me. Both Williams out at the same point. First of all, Hill goes off, then Coulthard, then Hill again.
And it looks like Eddie Irvine spun at that point too. There's no doubt the rain is coming down at that far side of the circuit. Certainly that would explain Irvine and Coulthard. You can see a rather gleeful face there from Flavio Briatore. I'm afraid he's looking at a driver whose ability does not match that of Michael Schumacher, and he knows it.
And he knows too that Benetton have won the 1995 Constructors' Championship, the double crown, the World Championship for Michael Schumacher. And as a distraught, disconsolate Damon Hill trudges off the track, Michael Schumacher races on to what now seems like an absolutely certain 9th win in this, the 16th race of 1995, to equal Nigel Mansell's 1992 record. It hasn't happened yet, but I think the only thing that can stop it is something going wrong with his Benetton or his Renault engine, both of which are very unlikely to fail him. And of course his pits will have been telling him that people are going off on the Spoon Curve. But since he told them, first of all, anyway, that there was a problem there, I have absolutely no doubt that he will be watching things very carefully indeed. Now, quick word from Tony Jardine in the Benetton pit.
I just think that it's more important for the Benetton guys here to win the World Constructors' Championship than the World Drivers' Championship. They've been going potty congratulating each other, but they deserve it after such a wonderful year, because after all, with their pit work, their guys wouldn't be where they are, and they're still slapping each other on the back. They do deserve it, but great celebrations here in the Benetton pit, and I wish they'd stop slapping my equipment.
And you can tell them, Tony Jardine, as we watch this replay of the Williams Renault of Damon Hill spinning off and out of the race, that not only is Michael Schumacher in the lead, we're with Hill now on a replay on car. You can see that gravel trap getting closer and closer. The rear wheels go in and he stops.
Yes, and watch for the Jordan here. Oh, we didn't quite see it long enough, but the face of Frank Williams. The sigh, the resigned sigh, says it all, I'm afraid.
David Coulthard, replay. This is him going off. Same place.
And there, in fact, no, that's at the end. That's the 130R, I do believe. And we could see there that the gravel did indeed come out of the side pods. Let's look at it again. Coulthard has got out of his first bit of trouble. He brakes. Away comes all of that gravel. He collected it at the previous corner. I have to say that was rather bad luck to actually go off at this corner for David Coulthard. I don't really think he could have anticipated just how dramatic the effect of that gravel was going to be, but it was the secondary consequence of an initial mistake. It has to be said, a mistake from Coulthard. And really, you know, these gravel traps are designed so that they should actually retain the car in the first instance. One really shouldn't be able to drive out of them.
Compounded misery for the Williams team, compounded delight for the Benetton team, because the mechanics will now, in the Benetton area, not only be celebrating the fact that Michael Schumacher looks a certain winner of the Japanese Grand Prix, but his teammate Johnny Herbert, who won the British Grand Prix, who won the Italian Grand Prix, and who so much needs a good finish here to bolster his chances of getting into the Sauber or even the Tyrrell team next year, is third in Japan, a long way behind Mika Hakkinen. There he is, who is in second place, hopefully for his second place of 1995. Schumacher, Hakkinen, Herbert, Irvine is fourth, Parnis is fifth for Ligier, and Mika Salo is in the points in Japan for Tyrrell.
But this is a fantastic drive from Mika Hakkinen. His qualifying form was superb, qualifying third, back. after that appendectomy was great, particularly as the McLaren car really has been down in the doldrums. When you think that they qualified 10th and 11th and were well out of the picture at the last Grand Prix when Blundell and Magnussen were driving. But Hakkinen has been quick. He's also coped with a car that's known to be difficult in wet conditions, with wet conditions to start with and then the damp conditions later on. He's not made a mistake. He's kept charging hard. He really is superb. And I must say, these changing weather conditions that we've seen with those showers that have caught so many out really would have been the ideal environment for Jean Alesi had he been out there to continue to show his ability. Still see quite a lot of water around, in fact. You haven't got to get far offline. When you're obviously on a damp part of the track, you can see Hakkinen keeping right to the outside. You can also see the lighter colour of the tarmac, and that is where the track is dry. And it definitely is dry pretty much on that line, but you only need to be 2 or 3 feet away either side, and you're onto the damp, and that can mean instant spins.
Watch Michael Schumacher. 23 cars and drivers started this race. There are 12 left now that Damon Hill has retired. Damon Hill is out, David Coulthard is out, Montemini is out in the Pacific. Both the Ferraris of Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger have retired. The other Pacifica, Bertrand Gachot, has retired. Roberto Moreno is out. Rubens Barrichello has long since retired. Ukyo Katayama failed to finish the Grand Prix that means most of all to him, his home race in Japan. And Gianni Morbidelli was the first to disappear from the lap charts right at the beginning of the race.
We're looking at Eddie Irvine, and hasn't he done a great job here this afternoon? He qualified superbly in 7th place, but then he fought off literal physical assault. First of all from his teammate Barrichello, and then from Frentzen. And in fact, what was interesting is that in the pits, to have their respective damage repaired, both Frentzen and Irvine were stationary for the same amount of time, and that was around about 15 seconds, 20 seconds, something of that order. But Irvine has kept going. He really is a much more confident driver, much more determined driver ever, now that he's secured that Ferrari seat for next year. It's going to be very interesting to see whether or not Michael Schumacher, we're looking at him now, is going to have a greater threat from Eddie Irvine as a teammate at Ferrari than he has done at Benetton when he's had Johnny Herbert as a teammate. And I think Irvine is going to be far better equipped with his character. He really is not fazed by anybody. And in fact, it was at this race 2 years ago when Irvine had the temerity to re-overtake Ayrton Senna after Senna lapped him in a race, and Senna was so wound up afterwards by the fact that Irvine really didn't respect the Grand Prix protocol that Senna ended up allegedly hitting him. So Irvine never has been one to get fazed by anybody, and I don't see it happening next year at Ferrari either. The question is just how quick can he be in the face of this man who is in a class of his own. It's quite simple. Whether it's in qualifying, whether it's in strategy, whether it's in racecraft, overtaking the back markers, coping with changing weather conditions, whatever you throw at Michael Schumacher, he copes with it with more aplomb than anybody else. It really is quite simple. And what a tremendous shame that we have not been able to see Schumacher vie with the great Ayrton Senna to see who would come out on top of those two, because those two, to my mind, really are, or were, with late Ayrton Senna, quite superb, a class above anybody else that they're currently racing with.
Seven laps to go for Michael Schumacher as he crosses the line, and he sees in front of him at the end of the straight Eddie Irvine in 4th position, who he will catch and lap if he so desires. He doesn't have to, of course, because he's 25 seconds ahead of Mika Hakkinen. So the two Ferrari teammates of 1996, Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine, are in the top 4 in respectively their Benetton and Jordan Peugeot cars. It looks as though Mika Hakkinen and McLaren and Mercedes, jointly working together as they have been all through the season in the most disappointing circumstances, are finally getting things right. Mika Hakkinen had a special engine built by Ilmor for Mercedes-Benz in the qualifying sessions, and he was well up on the grid as a result of that, because he started in 3rd position. He's got a race engine in here, but it's fast, reliable. Mika, who, as you heard earlier on, is just recovering from an appendix operation, took out his own stitches here on Thursday, believe it or not. and is showing no ill effects from it at all. You can see the track is now virtually totally dry. There are some damp patches, but on the racing line it really is dry. They're on slick tyres, they're on lap 47, it's a 53 lap race, so there's not many laps to go now to the end of the 1995 Japanese Grand Prix, the second race in succession in Japan, because we had Aida last weekend, also won by Michael Schumacher, who now leads the man you're looking at, Mika Häkkinen from Finland, in his Häkkinen's 63rd Grand Prix by just under 25 seconds. And that is Olivier Panis in the points for Ligier Mugen. It's the only Ligier in the race, as his teammate Aguri Suzuki will be watching this race from hospital after his crash yesterday. A broken rib, it looked a lot worse than that at the time, but he'll be out of hospital the day after tomorrow. And Panis needs these points to help his reputation. He's had one or two poor finishes this year, and there have been rumours that he's going to lose his drive for Ligier next year. Well, this will help him retain it.
It will indeed, and you could see there how Panis was carefully keeping to that dry line, the lighter grey coloured line, knowing that just to go across onto the dark side, particularly when cornering or braking, could spell disaster. But Martin Brundle must be looking on with this. We know he's on the pit wall down in the Ligier team. He's going to be moving to the Jordan team for next year. But thinking, well, if Panis can do that, if Panis can be fifth, I could have been fourth. And he's probably right, because Brundle has generally outperformed Panis this year and was reluctantly accepting of the situation that because of sponsor pressures, Aguri Suzuki was destined to drive in Aida, here at Suzuka, and then originally the following race in Adelaide. But I think after a relatively lacklustre performance at the previous Grand Prix at Aida, Suzuki was going to announce his retirement yesterday afternoon from Formula One racing. But sadly, very sadly for Suzuki, he had that big accident and ended up being hospitalised at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, recovering from that rather than announcing his retirement to a grateful press call. So anyway, I'm sure, as we've heard, he is still watching that race carefully and seeing his teammate do so well here.
Well, now let's look outside the top six for a moment, because Mark Blundell, who started 23rd after that terrific crash yesterday, is now 7th. He's only 10 seconds behind Mika Salo, and he's lapping faster than the Finn. We're with Mika Häkkinen now, 23 seconds behind Schumacher.
I think we can also look outside the commentary box window here, because the rain, to my mind, is just starting to fall again lightly. And it's these kind of changing conditions. The drivers are going to be seeing a few spots of rain on their visor. Whether it'll just be a very brief flurry, it'll go away. And there, I think, could be a casualty of it. Now, that's coming out of the pit chicane there. We may see a replay. It looks like, yes, it is Lamy in one of the Minardi cars. It may be entirely coincidental, and that's going to do his tyre grip no good at all. But probably better than trying to engage reverse and doing a 3-point turn, because whilst these cars are obliged to have reverse gears, in reality they're not designed to work for more than a scrutineering check in the pit lane, or certainly they don't end up working for much more than that before braking. So we'll keep an eye on that weather and to see whether or not this rain does build up.
There is Mika Salo, the leader of these two cars here. The Finnish driver, he is in 6th position for Tyrrell. The Tyrrell team only have 2 points in the Constructors' Championship. That's a replay of Lamy going off in the Minardi Ford. He was in 9th position. And Salo turns into the spoon curve. We're on lap 49. That's Frentzen behind him, who is in 8th position. So Frentzen is vying to get into the points. The order on lap 50 out of 53, Schumacher leads. Here we are with Eddie Irvine, who is in 4th position, 21 seconds behind Johnny Herbert, who is 3rd. Häkkinen is 2nd, Schumacher leads. Behind Irvine, who we are riding with now, round turn 6 up into turn 7. As we look at Michael Schumacher gaining on him soon, probably to lap the Jordan, if, as I said earlier, he wants to do so. There's absolutely no need for him to. And Salo is 6th, Blundell is 7th and gaining gaining very quickly indeed, because Salo's last lap was 1:47, Blundell's lap was 1:45, and he's now only 8 seconds behind. It's conceivable that Mark Blundell will finish in the points, and since we think that Jan Magnussen, who drove so well at AIDA last weekend, will be in the McLaren in Adelaide, Australia, it would be a wonderful finish for Mark Blundell's career with McLaren this year.
Yes, it would indeed. Absolutely fantastic if Blundell can take that 6th place. A, getting into the top 6, and B, of course, doing it from the very back of the grid, and C, doing it after having such a big impact in yesterday's qualifying sessions. But he's slowly picking up. And I think the situation at McLaren will be, and we've actually got Tony Jardine down in the pits with David Coulthard, we've just heard.
David, a very, very sad sight seeing you go off there. What exactly happened?
Well, it's just simply we had a little bit of rain round the back of the circuit. And I didn't want to lose any time at all, so I kept pushing, and it was quite wet on that corner, and I slid off. I came back on the circuit, and then the problem was when I got to the fast corner, when I dabbed the brakes, all the gravel came out of my side pods. And I spun in my own gravel, so a disappointing way to end the weekend, especially after the guys did a brilliant job in the pits to get me out in front of Mika.
Now you're clutching your neck here. Have you hurt yourself at all?
I just went in sideways, so I've cracked my neck a little bit, but it'll be fine.
So disappointing, obviously, but just looking forward to the last race in Australia now.
Yeah, very disappointed to go off here because it's been a hard weekend, and second place would have been a good result. But now, obviously, we've just got Australia to look forward to. And it would be nice to leave Williams with a win.
Thank you, David.
Well, you look at Michael Schumacher on his 51st lap, just 2 more after this one. And good news for Mark Blundell and all his many fans all over the world. I've just heard that Ron Dennis, the boss of McLaren, has stated that Blundell will be driving in Australia and not the young Danish driver Jan Magnussen.
That really is fantastic news. I'm really very pleased indeed with that. You know, the psychology of racing is such an important thing, and Mark Blundell had things very difficult when Hakkinen came back with such explosive form on the Friday. He's recovered beautifully here this afternoon. He's currently lapping as fast as Mika Hakkinen. He's now within 4.5 seconds of Mika Salo. He's driving an absolutely storming race, and it looks like he's going to be right on the tail of Salo in the last lap. Whether he can get by, I think it's probably unlikely, but I think Mark has done enough here this afternoon to prove that he really does deserve to have that final race with McLaren in Adelaide. And at the moment, he's trying hard to secure one of 2 drives available. One is with Tyrrell, and the other is with the Sauber team.
With Eddie Irvine, the reason we're with Eddie Irvine in 4th place is that right behind him is race leader Michael Schumacher on his penultimate lap. Just this lap, the 52nd, and next lap, the 53rd to go to his 9th win, an incredible record of 1995. Mika Hakkinen there is now still some 23 seconds behind the race leader, but looking good for his second place of the year. A tremendous encouragement for Ron Dennis there, for Norbert Haug of Mercedes-Benz, and everybody in the McLaren organisation at Woking. But Schumacher has been the man here, just as he was at AIDA with a magnificent drive last weekend, and just frankly as he has been at so many races this year, particularly the Grand Prix of Europe at the Nürburgring, that storming drive of his, the Belgian Grand Prix where he started 16th on the grid and came through to win, his own German Grand Prix which he won at Hockenheim, and so it goes on. The 9th win coming up. There's just 1 lap to go at the end of this one. There he is behind Eddie Irvine.
Yes, it's all been said so many times before now. Schumacher is in a class of his own, and he's certainly proved here that winning the World Championship, or clinching the World Championship as he did at the previous race, has not curtailed his thirst for success 1 degree whatsoever. Pole position, the first time since Canada, gone on to score this dominating win. It may not have been had Jean Alesi kept up that remarkable performance and that was stopped when his engine had some kind of major problem in the early part of the race. So great performance from Jean Alesi. But second place, Mika Häkkinen. The McLaren team are going to be absolutely ecstatic. A brilliant drive from Mika Häkkinen, a great performance from McLaren. Benetton team with Johnny Herbert in third place though have justifiably collected the Constructors' Championship. Great jubilation for them, and I'm afraid the Williams team may have been the team that should have won it. I think they had the best car here, and I think Benetton probably realised that. But I'm afraid the truth of the matter is that sadly this year the drivers just have not matched up to the performance of the car, and we saw that here today with mistakes from both Damon Hill and David Coulthard. I'm sure that in the future they can both put in the levels of performance that they need to justify those kind of drives, but it hasn't happened today.
Schumacher not very far to the checkered flag now, and if Johnny Herbert stays in that third position which he's in now, it will take him back past Jean Alesi in the Drivers' Championship to fourth place. But most importantly for Benetton, and you've seen the mechanics coming out of the garage up to the pit lane. AIDA was great for them when Michael Schumacher won his 8th race and clinched the Drivers' World Championship. But Suzuka the following Sunday here today is going to be even greater, because this will be the first Constructors' Championship for Benetton. We've seen McLaren win it so many times. We have seen Williams win it so many times. Michael Schumacher is exiting the chicane. Flavio Briatore is ready to receive the Benetton, and Michael Schumacher wins in Japan to equal Nigel Mansell's all-time record of 9 wins in one season, to give Benetton the Constructors' Championship. And he said yesterday that that was his goal and he wasn't going to let up. He was going to go on to give his team the success they deserved, and he's done it. And Mika Häkkinen has finished in second place, less than 20 seconds behind Michael Schumacher there. We just wait now for Johnny Herbert, who is a long way behind Häkkinen, 63 seconds on the previous lap, to make it a wonderful, wonderful day for Benetton. First and third, 14 points in the Constructors' Championship. They only needed to go to Adelaide with a 16-point advantage over Williams, and now they're going to have much, much more than that. They're going to have a 35-point advantage over Williams, having won the championship. So, to reprise, Japan, Suzuka sees victory for Schumacher. There is Johnny Herbert, almost home, into the chicane. Well, he really can roll across the line now and take that third place to add to his 2 wins in Britain and Italy and his second place in Spain. He's going to be on the podium again, and look at them, delighted. And Mika Salo is going to take that 6th position by just at 1.8 seconds from Mark Blundell. Schumacher wins, Häkkinen second, Herbert third, Eddie Irvine fourth, Parnis lapped but in 5th position, 6th Mika Salo, and Blundell 7th, Frentzen 8th, Luca Badoa 9th, Carl Wendlinger finishes 10th, but 2 laps down, and joy unbridled at Benetton. Well, Jonathan, what more, if anything, can we add to what we have said about Michael Schumacher? Last year he won the championship in very contentious circumstances, with a lot of criticism and allegations about the Benetton team, which left an unpleasant taste in his mouth. He won the championship with 12 races from the 16, because he was excluded for one reason or another from 4 of them. But he won the championship, admittedly only by a small amount from Damon Hill, but first is first. But there's been absolutely no doubt about it this year. He's crushed the opposition, and he takes the coveted #1 to Ferrari with him next year.
Yes, I must say, I really rather doubted certainly the allegations, or benefit of the allegations, of any rule infringements from Benetton last year. I didn't think they really had occurred, and Schumacher's performances this year have proven that there's been absolutely no degree of of comment at all about anything untoward with Benetton this year, and I think there's no doubt it's down to all their success is down to superb driving from that man, unrivaled driving, great teamwork, great pit work. As we've said, not necessarily the best car, but Schumacher with the team have made the best of the package and won, of course, not just the drivers but the Constructors' Championship too. And I think the big question now is what's going to happen next year. We know the situation for this year. Next year Schumacher will be with Ferrari. Now Ferrari have not been truly race-winning competitive for a very long time, well over a decade. But after initially, I must admit, I thought Schumacher had gone there purely for the money, and a lot of it has to be said, $25 million. I really think that he's got a chance of winning there next year too. The way that this chap can help develop the team, the bonding that he can get with the principal, and just look at that relationship there with Flavio Briatore. Benetton taking Schumacher on a long time ago, back in the end of 1991 from the Jordan team. And that really is the end of an era, I'm afraid, we're looking at now. We've got one more race of seeing Schumacher in a Benetton when he's going to be into a Ferrari alongside Eddie Irvine, and the question is who's going to rival them next year?
I always think of Jack Hulbert when I look at Michael Schumacher. That'll mean something to our older viewers. He looks very much like him. And, well, that's his 19th win. Italian Flavio Briatore proudly waves the Union Jack. It is, after all, a British team. The Benettons are constructed at Enstone, and as I have also said before, the fact that this is not Schumacher's 19th victory has not diminished his enthusiasm one iota. He looks just as pleased to have won here in Japan this weekend as he was last weekend, and every other victory. And there is the contrast. Damon Hill, well, there's really nothing to say, I think.
No, I do feel very, very sorry for Damon Hill, I must say. There is nothing more gutting than knowing that one has not put in the performance expected of one. I'm afraid that is a situation with Damon. We know he's tried his very best. Of that, there is no doubt whatsoever. But sadly, his best this year has not been good enough. Not good enough to cope with that man. And I fear not good enough to cope with a number of drivers. I don't think that Häkkinen, I think that Häkkinen and Alesi, to mention two, would have done a better job, I'm afraid, with that car. And let's just hope over the winter that Damon can regroup, and he will need a good result in Adelaide, really, to end the note with a degree of optimism, to help buoy him up over the winter, to help come back next year. But for Schumacher, this is not just his 19th win, it's his 9th win this season. And that, by my recollection, matches him with Nigel Mansell, who I think has the record for a year of 9 wins in a season. And if he goes on to take a 10th one, and as he may well do at Adelaide, that will give him, with 10 wins, the greatest number of Grand Prix victories for any driver in one season.
So, all over in Japan. It's been a very unusual Japanese ending of this trip, because the Pacific Grand Prix last weekend was supposed to have been held at the beginning of the season and had to be postponed because of that dreadful earthquake at Kobe. And it's hats off to everybody in Japan, particularly Fuji Television, who have had to cope with the massive job of doing 2 major Formula One broadcast coverage in 2 weekends in different parts of the country, and they are a long way away from each other. But they've coped with it magnificently. The organisation of both races flew perfectly good, and everybody has been extremely cheerful, extremely helpful, and extremely accommodating. But now there is the last, and for all of us, the most emotional journey, the one to Australia for the last Grand Prix at Adelaide, as Michael Schumacher mounts the podium for the 9th time on the top step this year. Now the anthem for the winning constructor, Benetton. Mika Häkkinen on the left, second place. Michael Schumacher there, the winner, and his teammate Johnny Herbert, the right. Mr. Hisashi Hieda, who is the president of Fuji Television, presents that superb trophy to Schumacher, and now the winning constructors trophy. The second place driver, Mika Häkkinen, gets his trophy from Mr. Takashi Matsuda, who is the president of Suzuka Circuit Land. That's the track that this wonderful race has been held on. And to Johnny Herbert, the trophy goes from Mr. Kunio Nihira, who is the vice president of the Japanese Automobile Federation. Three very, very happy men, and let's hope that this helps Johnny Herbert in particular to get the drive that he needs next year.
Absolutely right. You know, Herbert has certainly not matched Schumacher's pace, he knows that, but he's been a great racing driver this year. His finishing record is the best of any driver in Formula One. Of the 16 Grand Prix he's now taken part in, he's finished in 13. He really makes very, very few mistakes. And frankly, the ones that he didn't finish in were when the chap on your right, Mika Häkkinen, hit him, certainly in Canada, and then Johnny Herbert also got hit in the French Grand Prix too. Schumacher ecstatic, but this race I think really belongs in terms of the notable achievement to Mika Häkkinen and the McLaren team. We've had a lot of long period of doldrums from McLaren, but with a car that's reverted to the mid-season specification, it's not the latest one, that didn't work. McLaren really have made progress once again with the setup. The engineers have worked very well. Pat Fry, Mika Häkkinen's engineers, worked so well with the Finn, and Mika Häkkinen I think has also benefited from the rest. He'd been doing so much testing in the quest by the McLaren team to get competitive again that I think Häkkinen got worn down too, and even his great talent was not really being shown to his best advantage. But he's had the break, he's lost the appendix, and he's come back, and he looks absolutely thrilled. And let's just hope this does mark a change in McLaren's fortunes to give Häkkinen and Coulthard, who's joining him next year, a chance in the McLaren Mercedes to rival Schumacher in the Ferrari in 1996.
Häkkinen finished second, but his teammate Mark Blundell drove an equally superb race, and he's in 7th position, and he's with Tony Jardine now.
Mark, what an incredible turnaround for you. 2 big crashes, starting right at the back, not feeling good. 7th position, it was nearly 6th.
Nearly 6th, but it ended up 7th. I'm just really upset that I didn't actually qualify the car properly, because I had to start from last position, and it's really killed us. If we'd have started in the top 10, we'd be in the points for sure.
Nonetheless, a great comeback. Now, just exactly how did you feel? You were concussed yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't feel too good yesterday, I must admit, and good recovery overnight. Joseph, our physio, looked after me very well, and I was able to do the race. And you know, now I feel not too bad, but I'm just really a little bit angry with myself that I didn't start off with a better position.
Are you looking forward to Australia?
Yes, and I'm looking forward to score points in my last race for McLaren.
Thank you very much, Mark, and well done.
Thanks a lot.
Well done indeed, Mark Blundell. And it's ironic that Mark Blundell, who finished 7th, just failed to finish 6th, and Johnny Herbert, who finished 3rd, are the 2 drivers who are vying for the 2nd seat in the Sauber team next year to accompany Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who they both beat today because he was in 8th position. And the top 10 then in the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka were Michael Schumacher 1st, Häkkinen 2nd, Herbert 3rd, Eddie Irvine 4th, Parnis 5th, Sarlo 6th, Blundell 7th, Frentzen 8th, Badeur 9th, and Karl Wendlinger in 10th place. To complete the top 12, because only 12 finished, Pedro Lamy brought his Minardi home in 11th place, and Taki Inoue finished in 12th position, and that is the 3rd highest that he has ever been in his short Formula One career. And so there were 11 failures to finish, 2 of the most notable, of course, being Damon Hill and David Coulthard. No World Championship points for Williams. The 2 others, Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger, no World Championship points for Ferrari. But as I said earlier on, Johnny Herbert leaps ahead of Jean Alesi in the Drivers' Championship to move up into 4th position, and Damon Hill will still be fighting for that 2nd place at this emotional getting together that we're going to be having in Adelaide in 2 weeks' time for the last Australian Grand Prix there.
Michael, congratulations. You have now achieved your aim of winning the World Championship and Benetton's first Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, that's a fantastic feeling. Now I really can feel more than happy. I mean, happy is certainly not the word for my feelings at the moment, because the team really earned this championship, because they have been last year and this year the really best team in the paddock, and now we fulfilled our promises to go for the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship. By the way, now we equal as well Nigel Mansell's record, and now we go in Australia for a new one.
You had pole position and fastest lap. The only serious challenge during the race seemed to come from Jean Alesi. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I was totally aware of this, because my mirror was full of a red car at certain times, and it was close at certain stages, but fortunately I was able to maintain. Then after a gap, he was quite quick at the beginning stage on dry tyres, where I needed a couple of laps to get into the circuit and get the rhythm. And after I got this, I was able to pull a little gap to him.
Mika, your second place of the season, but this time it seemed to be much more convincing than at Monza.
Absolutely. It was great. Absolutely great from start to finish. And start was really good. Didn't have any problems in the start. Didn't lost any places. Unfortunately, I didn't gain anything either, but I kept my place. And I was able to keep my speed basically with Michael and with Sean. And also Hill, who was behind me, wasn't able to overtake me. It was good. I was able to all the time keep this distance similar. And the whole race went really, really nice, all the way from start to finish.
Johnny, a good solid race. What was your strategy before the race?
Well, the strategy was obviously try and get a good start. The conditions were obviously going to change, so it was trying to be in the right position at the right time, and we seemed to have some good pit stops as well, which obviously helped a lot. And you know, the result was very good, and especially for Benetton, who've done a fantastic job along with Renault and Mile 7. It's been you know, a good year, and it's good being part of that and actually putting a few points on the board for them.
And now you're only 4 points behind David Coulthard, so the third place in the World Championship must be in your sights.
Yeah, well, after the win in Monza, obviously that was a big thing that it made everything very, very close, and getting the third here obviously has closed that gap again, which is good. And going into Adelaide, hopefully we can, you know, finish first and third.
Gentlemen, thank you. Michael, now some in German.
That's the Japanese Grand Prix, his 19th Grand Prix victory, and the result that underlines everything that Michael Schumacher has achieved this season, the newly crowned world champion, with his 9th victory of the season, equalling Nigel Mansell's winning total, and every reason to anticipate that Schumacher will break that record at the final round at Adelaide in a fortnight's time. Great encouragement for McLaren and Mika Häkkinen, another second place, less than 20 seconds behind. And the Drivers' Championship table with Johnny Herbert moving up into 4th place, just 4 points behind David Coulthard. But the contest for runners-up spot, that's resolved, with Damon Hill and David Coulthard both going out today. The gap remains 10 points with just that one race remaining, and that means that Damon can't be overhauled by Coulthard for second place in the championship. Small consolation that for Damon on another desperate day for the Williams team. They've had to concede the Constructors' title to Benetton, who are champions for the very first time by virtue of Schumacher's victory today, as well as Johnny Herbert's third position. Celebrations not only in the Benetton pit in Japan, but also around the Benetton factory in Enstone in Oxfordshire. They're the champion Constructors. And that's the Japanese Grand Prix. We'll have a full-length rerun of the race at 8 o'clock on BBC 2, a full-length rerun of the Japanese Grand Prix, but Michael Schumacher's done it again. The world champion has won in Japan. From us all, until 8 o'clock. Bye for now.